History remembers kings, it remembers conquerors. But one woman rose so high and became so dangerous that the men who came after her tried to chisel her name out of existence. Not just forgotten. Erasure was the goal. Who was she? And why was an entire civilization so afraid of her that they tried to make her disappear? This is the story of a ruler who broke every rule of her world and nearly got away with it. For 3,500 years, her secret held. Her monuments stood in silence, her name sealed inside broken cartouches, her face hacked from temple walls by chisels wielded generations after her death. It would take modern archaeology, forensic science, and a mummy hidden in an unmarked tomb to finally answer the question Egypt tried so hard to bury. Dark history. Hidden history. The story of Hatshepsut, a woman who ruled as pharaoh and an empire that tried to make sure no one would ever know. Egypt, around 1500 BCE, was not a gentle place for ambition. The 18th dynasty had clawed the kingdom back from foreign occupation. Hyksos invaders had been driven out at last. A new dynasty, hungry and proud, was rebuilding an empire on the banks of the Nile. Power in this world flowed through one channel, only the office of pharaoh, a living god and by tradition always a man. Queens existed. Queens mattered, but queens served. They ruled through their husbands or in their sons' names as regents holding a throne until a boy grew old enough to take it himself. That was the rule. That was the order the gods themselves were believed to have written into the fabric of the world. No one told Hatshepsut that rules like this were permanent. She was born into the royal house of Thutmose I, a daughter, not a son, in a family where sons were currency and daughters were alliances waiting to happen. But Hatshepsut was not raised to be forgotten. Her education went far beyond what most royal daughters received: religion, ritual, the sacred language of kingship itself. She was named God's wife of Amun, one of the most powerful religious titles in Egypt, years before anyone imagined she might need real political power at all. When her husband, Thutmose II, died young, the throne passed to his son, a child, Thutmose III, born not to Hatshepsut but to a lesser wife. Egypt needed a regent. Hatshepsut stepped into the role exactly as tradition demanded. For a few years, she played the part she was given. Then, sometime around year 7 of the young king's reign, something extraordinary happened, something Egypt had almost no precedent for. Hatshepsut did not remain regent. She became pharaoh. She took the full titles of a king, wore the false beard of kingship in official art, and commissioned statues that showed her body transformed. Broad-shouldered, bare-chested, unmistakably male in form, because in the sacred logic of Egyptian religion, pharaoh was not merely a job. It was an office woven into the identity of male gods themselves. Was it vanity or survival? Historians still argue over what drove her: pure ambition, political necessity, or genuine belief that she alone could hold Egypt together while a child grew up. What is certain is this: her reign was not a disaster. It was one of the most prosperous, stable periods Egypt had seen in generations. She launched a legendary trading expedition to the land of Punt, returning with incense, ebony, ivory, and living myrrh trees, recorded in exquisite detail on the walls of her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, a building so architecturally daring it still leaves modern engineers impressed. Temples rose under her orders. Monuments damaged during the Hyksos occupation were restored. Egypt's borders held largely secure throughout her reign. And somewhere in the shadow of her success, a boy who had once been promised the throne was growing into a man. Named Thutmose III, he would eventually rule alone, and historians believe never forgot what had been taken from him. Decades after Hatshepsut's death, something began happening across Egypt that archaeologists would not fully understand until modern times. Her statues were smashed, not stolen, not repurposed. Smashed, deliberately, into pieces small enough to be difficult to reassemble. Temple inscriptions lost her name too, chiseled away and sometimes replaced with the names of male predecessors as if she had simply never sat on the throne at all. At Deir el-Bahari, her carved images were hacked from the walls, the false beard and royal regalia stripped away stone by stone. For a long time, historians assumed this was an act of pure, personal hatred. Thutmose III finally taking revenge on the stepmother who had denied him his throne for 20 years. But the timing told a stranger story. The destruction didn't begin right after her death. It began years later, late in Thutmose's own reign. That single detail cracked the old theory wide open. Why wait decades to erase an enemy? This is where the competing theories begin. Some Egyptologists argue the erasure was never personal rage at all, but cold political calculation. Thutmose was securing the succession for his own son and a female pharaoh. An unprecedented one was a dangerous exception. Erase the exception, and the sacred, unbroken line of male kings could be rewritten as though it had never been broken. Others point to religious anxiety. Hatshepsut's reign blurred the boundary between king and god in ways that may have unsettled later priests, who saw her unusual kingship as a theological problem needing correction. Still others caution against reading too much intention into damage that, in some cases, may simply reflect ordinary quarrying, later pharaohs recycling stone from older monuments, a common and unglamorous practice across Egyptian history. For decades, without her mummy, without conclusive proof, the truth stayed buried. Then, in 2007, everything changed. Egyptologist Zawhi Hawass and his team identified a previously unidentified mummy, one that had been sitting largely ignored in a minor tome, as Hatshepsut herself, confirmed through a matching tooth fragment found in a small box bearing her name. Her body had survived. Obese, diabetic, likely suffering from bone cancer, she had died in her late 40s or early 50s. An ordinary human ending for a woman who had once ruled as a living god. The mummy that emerged told a story stone inscriptions never could. A real woman, a real illness, a real death, in a world that had tried so hard to erase her existence that it very nearly succeeded. For nearly 3,000 years, king lists compiled by later Egyptian scribes simply skipped her, folding her reign quietly into that of the men around her, as though the throne had passed directly from father to son with no interruption at all. It wasn't malice from history itself. It was the result of one dynasty's careful, patient editing, and it worked almost perfectly until archaeologists began reading temple walls too closely in the 19th century and noticed something impossible: a king with a woman's name, hiding in plain sight beneath layers of deliberate damage. Today, Hatshepsut is remembered as one of the most successful rulers in Egyptian history, male or female, proof that the old myth of her weakness or failure was never historical fact at all, only propaganda that outlived the woman it was built to bury. Her story raises an uncomfortable question that reaches far beyond ancient Egypt. How many other powerful women were quietly written out of the record? Not through violence, but through the slow, deliberate erosion of memory. Somewhere beneath the sand, at Deir el-Bahari, her temple still stands, its terraces rising toward the cliffs, like steps built for a god who refused to be forgotten. The chisels that scarred her name from the stone could not reach the woman herself. They could only delay her. Hatshepsut ruled Egypt for over 20 years, built an empire's prosperity with her own hands, and was erased so thoroughly that historians once doubted she had ruled at all. She was found anyway, and perhaps that is the truest lesson hidden in this forgotten history. Power, built on erasing the past, has a way of failing, because the past, eventually, always finds a way to speak